The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you. Midweek editions here at Hail Varsity Radio are presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio at Herbal Essence. For Elijah, a lot to get to. It's been raining recruits, or either via the portal or from Elkhorn. We'll get there for Nebraska on the hardwood and gridiron. Tough night at Haymarket for Big Red Baseball. Some thoughts on the loss to UNO coming up, and we'll get it covered. Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity in about 15 minutes. Mike Schuchart. Shuey is smiling because it's warm, and depending what way the wind's blowing and what tee box you're on out at Wilderness, could be one hell of a drive day or not. But Mike Schuchart to talk some golf with us at 4:40. Evan Bland will join us in hour 2, and then Dr. Ben Woodhead will talk about Tigers' prognoses moving forward with his plantar fasciitis and some of the hardware, as it's called, he's dealing with in his leg. Numbers to get in, 489-1240. 489-1240. Can also submit your comments, questions, thoughts via the stream. Ways to do that, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel or the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter handle at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow. Can interact with Damon and Andrew, of course, with Coffee and Cream that way, 7 to 10 weekday mornings. KFOR Facebook and Twitter. Also ways to get in touch with us video-wise. We are going to start keeping a tally. We thought about a swear jar for every time I called the Vegas Raiders either Oakland or L.A. But every time you get a compliment for the stash, we need to put $1 in the jar. We need the Elijah dollar mustache compliment bin just to see maybe someday I can, use it, dive in, embezzle to get you paid off with the steak and the beer bets.
Well, at what point do you just give in and start growing a mustache too? This becomes mustache radio as opposed to Hail Varsity Radio.
Brother, I grew a mustache for my father in 2020 as a tribute. And my dad had a mustache, and it looked glorious. Mine did not. There's a few Facebook memories that pop up, whether it's NCAA tournament time or other live shows we've done over the years, and I went with the Grizzly Adams beard at one point. Depending on how much prednisone I was hammering, it helps the old thickness. I don't know if I should try a stash or not. When I did wear it, it was told not to bring it back. I grew one until Nebraska won, which wasn't until Penn State in 2020. You have got that thing crafted. You've got it manicured. You look as good as a highway patrolman or an umpire. You could also go maximum security federal prison guard with that mustache. So I'm going to let you carry the water for the mustache. We'll have to ask Babbers if he'll grow a stash for us.
Yeah, I know the mustache movement even got a shout out on the Husker Baseball broadcast last night. They're in the 9th inning and they find some fan in the audience with the mustache.
The mustache cam.
They go, wow, it must be in with the 20-somethings. I'm like, it is. You're damn right it is. The mustache is in. I just got to find a reason to shave it and immediately regret it, because that's how it's going to go. Like, eventually I'm going to get tired of it. I'm going to shave it. I'm going to immediately regret it, and everyone on the stream is going to say, Elijah, what happened to your mustache?
You keep growing the mustache. We're going to talk about Motzi growing the Fu Manchu.
Yes.
And then we'll give Motzi a toothpick, and he can look like the guy from Eastbound and Down.
And then you can get the chin strap rocking?
No.
Chin strap? You got to get some sort of facial hair rocking.
No, I get ingrown hairs, and then it's acne city. So.
Well, you could start like really growing out the chest hair and then just wearing low cut shirts on the show.
I'm not great there either. I'm thankful I'm not a what do they say? Hey, take your sweater off. I'm thankful Uncle Mark is a furry beast. I did not get that gene. Let's talk some sports before we make everyone get sick in their mouth.
Our viewership numbers are just going up right now.
Oh, sure. It's Mustache and Chest Hair Wednesday. Why not? Husker Basketball. Mm-hmm. Great news for Fred Hoiberg. There's still one more name to get out there. Hunter Salas, of course. Time will tell with that. Nebraska isn't done after today. I think they'll try and go get a second post. But the good news is they got a first post. That's Rink Mast. He's from the Netherlands. I'm going to call him the Poltergeist 2.0. In all honesty, shout out to Richard Van Polgeest from my childhood. Rink Mast. This kid can play from Bradley. Mid-teens is what he averaged. He's always wanted to be a Big Ten guy. The portal has allowed that. Watching his film, wow. I love his mobility. First and foremost, I like the fact that the guy, every time he gets the ball, it's either I'm going to back you down, back towards the rim, and then, oop, here's a little jump hook you can't stop. Or he'll turn and face and just pull up with a paint jumper, and then the catch and shoot or the pick and pop. He's a weapon, and I don't have his percentages from three, but damn, the highlight tape that's posted looks pretty good.
I do have his percentages. He averaged
30%?
2.3 three-pointers a game, which I think is kind of what Fred Hoiberg has seen to work in the Big Ten from your four. A guy that has the ability to shoot from three, but that's not going to be the center point of his game.
The threat.
And he shoots 35% from three in those 2.3 attempts per game.
That's good.
The comp that I would give that I just get watching his film is a slightly smaller Walter Pitchford.
Okay.
That's kind of the feel I get with his game, and obviously every basketball is a little different.
I think he's a thicker pitch.
Yeah, he's like condense him down.
Sure,
condense him down. He gets thicker. He gets a little shorter. That's kind of the feel.
Walt was 6'11", wasn't he?
That sounds right.
Yeah, and from a ball handling standpoint, I mean, he's not bringing it up like Walker could. And I don't know that you'll ever replace what Walker could give you off the bounce from a ball handling standpoint as a big, but from an offensive option of your wings just slicing and dicing, going back door or cutting to the rim and getting a feed from the big man. Hey, Mast is a guy that can get plugged right in, you would think. He's researched Nebraska. He likes Nebraska's style. He fits Nebraska's style. He's physical. I know there's a jump from Mo Valley to the Big Ten, but I really like his physicality. And he's just, the myriad of moves with his drop step and his spin, even a little fadeaway towards the baseline. He's better than average from a mobility. I mean, he's a big that can handle the ball and create a shot. And he's good around the rim, and he needs to be clearly with that height and size.
And that's why I kind of give that Walter Pitchford comparison. And I'm not the basketball expert. Jacob Dill might show up on Friday and tell me I'm an idiot for that comp. But that's how I see it. And the one question that remains in my mind about him is, what does his defense look like? And you would assume that Fred Hoiberg, seeing the vision of what this team was last year, that he wouldn't go get guys that are liabilities defensively, but he feels like he is more offensively inclined than defensively inclined from what I've seen from his highlights. And I mean, that's just what highlights are.
A lot of defense is about effort and understanding as well. And from a rebound standpoint, you gotta claim that glass and then also team rebound. So you've got a couple of years left here for Mast. Love that pickup. I don't think Nebraska's done going with a big either, so we'll see what else is out there.
Yeah, and that's the other question in my mind. Is he a guy that is going to be your small ball center whenever you go a little bit smaller? Or are you trying to put him next to a Blaze and have a 7-foot presence next to a 6'9" presence? That's another question in my mind. What's that utilization going to look like? Is he the starting small ball center, and then if you need some size, you bring in Blaze? Or do you want to have both those guys working in combo? Do you want to bring in another big man in the portal? There's still some questions that remain to be answered here with this pickup, but I think he does slot in well to what this Husker basketball team kind of showed last year, what they want to be in the Big Ten. I do think he fits that well, at least on the offensive end.
No, big time. Iowa Cincy was after him. Nebraska got him. The other get today, Bryce Williams, HailVarsity.com. Jacob Badilla will have his take on both of these additions for Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska basketball. Williams, really talented ball player. Love him off the dribble. He really shows the ability to catch and shoot, as Raft would say, get those puppies organized. It's really good catch and shoot three or pull up three ability. But he is a guy that, at least some of the footage we've both watched, doesn't settle for bad shots. At least, again, prefacing this with the highlight tape, does a good job of attacking the rim, explosive on the baseline, can get to the rim and dunk. And I love his first step. You need that as a guard off the dribble, obviously, but I like his first step quickness. How, again, does that translate to some of the athleticism and physicality in the Big Ten? And I like that he goes left or right. He's not just no one can take my right away in Conference USA, so I'm just going to go right. He showed some ability to get left and then create a shot and finish at the rim. So Nebraska 2 for 2 today in portal additions. They're a fit. They're a buy-in, you would think, with the new way Nebraska wants to play, or at least a way that was more successful than it's ever been in the Big Ten for quite a while under Hoiberg. So good gets, well done by Fred and his staff. See if you can get Hunter, see if you can get a couple more guys, and you pair that with what's coming back. Presumably, hopefully you get Tominaga back. We don't have official word on that, but you've got guys on this roster that have had some success, that once they get healthy or decide to stick around, man, you could really mesh that well. I know there'll be an international trip here this summer for them to band and bond together. And then, we'll see what things look like here once basketball season gets going.
And with Williams in particular, obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of preseason and a lot of time before the season actually starts to figure out what his role is going to be. Feels to me like that six-man option. He actually spent a lot of time last season as the six-man coming in.
He only started 13 games.
Yeah, he was the leading scorer on the team, which is amazing considering the fact he only did start 13 games. And it's because whenever that second unit came in, he was the guy that they went to. He was the scoring option. He was the guy, you know what, second unit's in, we need a bucket, we're going to go to Williams. So I kind of would assume that that's the same role he's going to have at Nebraska. I don't necessarily see how he perfectly slots into a starting lineup, especially if Casey comes back. So I see him maybe as being a six-man, but again, we'll have to get Jacob Badilla's take on this. He knows a hell of a lot more about basketball than I do and what this potential fit could be, but that's the way I see it as well, which means Nebraska theoretically still could use another scoring wing to go into that starting lineup, and maybe that role would be reserved for Hunter Salas if he were to commit here. You also need a point guard, and then potentially another big man. But I feel like if you only got Rink, if that's the only guy you got this cycle,
you got a good one.
I think you got
the pit.
You got a good one, and then you just got to figure out what that front court's going to look like. Do you want to go those two guys next to each other, as I alluded to earlier? Is Rink your guy to bring in whenever you want to go small? That remains to be seen, but I think it does give you a little flexibility in terms of if you get another big man or not, where Nebraska really, really still needs a guy as that point guard spot.
We'll get to some Husker football. Ashton Murphy committing last night. Really good stuff from Hurrdat's Mike Sauter. So we'll hear from the newest Nebraska, the first in-state commit for 2024. Will Bolt, though. Last night, Husker Baseball falls again midweek. An extra innings loss to Omaha.
UNO has solidified their spot as the best team in Nebraska, apparently.
Yeah, because they whooped up on Creighton. UNO, I mean, tip of the cap to UNO. I know they're not having a great season record-wise, but they just need to schedule Nebraska every weekend, apparently. Will Bolt, his reaction to the loss last night.
In-state, out-of-state, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, it's not. It has nothing to do with the opponent. It has everything to do with mindset with your own team. And couldn't be more disappointed with the mindset of our position player group in particular tonight. I shouldn't just say that. I just say as our team as a whole. Just it wasn't from 2 days ago, probably playing our best, most disciplined, focused, intentful game of the year. Again, I say all these things with the utmost respect for Coach Porter and his team at Omaha. They've obviously taken it to us. They've done everything to win games, against us. And again, but it has very little to do intensity with the opponent, and you know, not showing up. We were step slow on defense. Our approach at the plate was pretty atrocious, I thought, for the entire night. You know, and we rallied there at the end. He had a chance to go win the game. You know, we didn't finish because I felt like we couldn't flip the switch on when we needed to. You know, when winning time came around. So I thought our bullpen did enough to give us a hold there, give us a chance to go score some runs like we're capable of doing. But just a really disappointing game all the way around.
He has every right to be pissed, and I'm the one saying pissed. He said disappointed, but listen, the way I'm listening to that, reading into, all right, you're up and you're amped for Michigan because it's Big Ten, it's a Big Ten series. Well, even though UNO beat us once before, it's just UNO. I mean, to me, there's a little, that's my read in. Okay, I could be way off, way wrong, but he touched on their attentiveness, and you had 2 errors, you had 9 left on base, you had 11 strikeouts last night, which was no good, and you've got Caleb Clark, who just had another tough outing, and that's 5 hits, 4 runs allowed, 3 earned, just 2+ innings pitched. You had a 2-out walk that ends up scoring. That's in the first inning off of an RBI triple. Didn't get any help defensively with a couple of errors where you had a play that was a high throw over to first and a run scores off a sac fly, and then you give up a 2-run shot when you're up in the count 0-2. Is no good. I mean, Nebraska is putting themselves in position with no margin for error the rest of the Big Ten season.
And one thing I want to get Mike Babcock's take on, he's in the green room, he's standing by. Did Nebraska leave in Shea Shannon to 1 too many innings? That's a question that I had at the time, and looking back, Will didn't mention it last night, but I wonder if he regrets that.
Mike Babcock's here with us next year on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Hail Varsity Radio with you on Wednesday. Mike Babcock joins us now. Can watch this segment on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Can follow Babbers on Twitter at MDBabs. He's in his football office. Awards and we'll say some artwork behind you. Babbers, that's a good setup, man. I love the backdrop. How we doing today? I think you're on mute, partner. Mike, I think you're on mute, bud. Let's see if that gets fixed.
I said a lot of substance there, but now I'm off mute. So
no, you're good. Repeat the substance, por favor.
yeah, I didn't realize I could control that. Actually,
no, you're good. You're good. So the awards the awards and the paintings and the pictures and the frames and the backdrop are good. I like it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's some Grateful Dead posters up there too.
No, I love it. That is good. There's some sort of pictures. Grateful Dead tie to Nebraska baseball, I'm sure. Long, strange trip as how the 2023 season is shaking out. Your takeaway last night, another midweek dud for the Big Red.
Yeah, I really thought when the Huskers came back, I kept thinking the Huskers were going to pull that game out. And, they got it back to 5-3 and they tied it up. And I thought at that point, the focus was there and that's what it would take to finish the game out. And the focus was there, obviously, for Omaha as well. And Omaha finished the game out. Nebraska didn't. So that's got to be, that's got to be crushing to lose that game to Omaha. The second time you've lost to Omaha this year. Lost to Omaha last year, the last game I think that you played them. Just frustration. And I think you could see it in what Coach Bolt said. I really didn't think that the Huskers had the focus that they needed to start the game. There wasn't that kind of energy that you would expect in a situation like that. And I don't know how to explain it any other way, because I do think that they have the ability to win that game, but they didn't have the focus to win it.
Mike, well, what did you make of Will Bolt in the presser? I don't want to say throwing the guys underneath the bus, but he wasn't happy with, as you mentioned, their energy early, wasn't happy with the defense, wasn't happy with the approach at the plate. But with all that being said, Nebraska put up 5 runs, sent it to extra innings, and in most games this year, I think 5 runs is going to be good enough for you to at least be in a place to win that game, which Nebraska was last night. And the difference was in the 10th inning, Shea Shanneman looked like he was wearing out just a little bit, and he's a guy that used to be a starter, but that's not his role right now. Are you concerned about the fact that Will Bolt didn't, point the thumb instead of the finger and say, hey, maybe we should have pulled Shea out there, because that was your difference in the game last night?
Well, yeah, but I think that they were all in, I think, with Shea. I think when they made that decision, we're all in. We're going to go with him. Like you said, he was a starter last year. He has the ability. This is the most that he's gone this season.
Mm-hmm.
He'd gone 3 innings before, but I just think it was an all-in kind of a thing. And I'm not sure who would you go to? Who do you have confidence in? I think they've built confidence after a not so good start for Shea. I think he's really come on, and I think they had confidence in him at that point that he could get it done. But that's a tough deal all the way around. And again, I think what Will Bolt said afterward, was immediately afterward he was frustrated, but I think you got to call them out if you really feel like they weren't focused. And I think that was kind of that underscored his opinion of that.
Mike, we spent a second on margin for error right now, and as you look at the Big Ten right now, you have Iowa, you have Maryland with some wow non-conference wins, but you don't have a lot of statement win opportunities. If you're Nebraska, you gotta win the ball games or win the series against some teams that are really struggling this year. But Nebraska has not been a sure thing to do that midweek against some better opponents or some opponents they should beat. So how do you do the math on the Big Red in postseason right now? Danger unless they just win out or win in Omaha.
I think you've got to, certainly win in Omaha, but I think you've got to be successful in the Big Ten. You've got to get things going here, and right now you're 4-2. You've got a Northwestern team. Here's a conundrum. Northwestern comes in at 5-22, but Northwestern took 2 out of 3 from Illinois. I mean, 3 of those 5 wins have been in conference games. So the Wildcats are 3-3 in conference play. You've got to focus on, it's really got to be the Huskers have to come out focused against Northwestern 3 times. I think that it's a team that you have the ability to sweep at home, but can they do it? And you got to at least win the series. And that's kind of got to be your focus, I think, going down the line, is win those conference series and then try to get maybe a sweep of a series or 2 and put yourself in position in the conference, because these midweek games are not looking so good right now.
Yeah, Mike, and whenever you look at the next week, it's a weekend series against Northwestern, who, as you mentioned, 5-22 on the season. Then you're back home. I guess you stay at home against Northwestern, but then you got another home game against Creighton on Tuesday night, and then you follow that up with Iowa, which is going to be a huge series in Iowa City this year. So as you look at the next 4, 3 against Northwestern, 1 against Creighton, what do you think Nebraska needs to do in those 4 games to have the kind of momentum that you're going to need to go and take on the good Iowa Hawkeyes baseball team this season?
Well, I think that you don't look past Creighton, that's for sure. There's been plenty of frustration there, too. So I think you have to, first of all, 1 game at a time with Northwestern. I think you've got to be successful against Northwestern. I think somewhere in here, you've got to win 3 of those 4 games. If that's 2 and Creighton, 2 Northwestern and 1 Creighton, that's okay. If it's 3 Northwestern, you got to get that Creighton jinx out of the way, and you've got to get this Omaha thing out of the way. Now they play Omaha once more, right? In Omaha,
yes,
is that right?
Yes.
You got to win that game, and you've got to get that Creighton game, I think. But 3 or 4 of the next 4 to build some momentum going into the Iowa game, and really 4 of 4, because I think that Creighton game is important going into the Iowa series. If you're going to have a more frustration coming out of the Creighton game, how is that going to play when you get to Iowa City?
It's momentum, absolutely. Mike Babcock with us from HailVarsity.com and magazine. Get the subscription with Hail Varsity, the digital, the print, HailVarsity.com/offer is how you can do that. Mike, spring football, Nebraska going to smack each other on Saturday for a pretty physical spring scrimmage, and then a week from Saturday is the spring game. When you look at this this session here and Coach Rhule, Rhule was asked about tackling and the Husker defense. What do you think's ailed the Big Red defense here the most if we just put it all together and mix it up in a pot here? What's been the biggest issue with Husker defense and the black shirt specifically? Has it been speed? Has it been tackling? Has it been physicality? What's ailed the defense?
Well, Nebraska's played decent defense, I think, the last couple of seasons. Part of the problem has been the offense, leaving them in difficult situations and having to respond to that. But I think, obviously one of the emphases that Coach Rhule has is recruiting speed on defense. He wants speed. I think that's important. Be interested to see, and were we able to watch the scrimmage on Saturday, we'd see more about what it's going to look like than we're going to see in the spring game, obviously. But I'm kind of interested in this defense, this 3-3-5 defense, and all the variations, the way they can shift it around. It requires speed, and you've got to be aggressive and physical. That's important. To be successful in the Big Ten, you got to be able to stop the run. Can this defense do that? We'll see.
Mike, now that we're a couple weeks into spring practice here and nearing the close, what side of the ball do you think has more question marks, and what side of the ball are you going to be watching more intently for that spring game? You mentioned the 3-3-5 and how different that's going to be. That's one element, but Nebraska's offense might have the quarterbacks live during the spring game, might be utilizing that quarterback run, and we really don't know what the offense is going to look like either. So which side of the ball do you think has more question marks that may get answered during the spring game? Maybe defense, only because of what's been said here lately, about there's very positive comments about the running back situation and the depth there. There are very positive comments about wide receivers. There have been positive comments about the tight ends, the offensive line. There have been positive comments about it. And I know it's spring and you're going to be building the guys up, get some positive vibes going. But I guess I'm more interested in the defense because of the difference in the way it's going to look. And obviously the offense is going to look different with a huddle and using a fullback on occasion. But I'm really interested in seeing what the defense looks like and how they've put that together, given the guys that they've lost. And, they brought in some talent. I'm pretty sure of that. But let's see how that plays out.
Mike, about 90 seconds here. Do you like the personnel that Nebraska has to play with on defense, be it Portal and even some of the younger guys on top of the old heads that are back? Yeah,
I do. Again, I just want to see where these guys fit in. How they're gonna use them. Chief Borders, where is he going to play? What is his position going to look like? And the defensive backs, they've kind of shifted them around, using them in different ways because there's experience returning there in the secondary, but they're using guys in different ways. Let's see how that fits. Yeah, I think they have brought in guys to fit around guys like Ty Robinson, Luke Reimer, Nick Henrich, Quentin Newsom, Miles Farmer, again, all the guys in the secondary. It'll be interesting to see how that fits together, but I do think they have the pieces.
Yeah, what kind of jump can the polar bear make with some mobility? We know the strength is there, but presumably he's going to be asked to anchor that middle and be a run stuffer, but also a playmaker along with Robinson. Mike, we will catch up with you next week. Thanks for giving us some time and giving us a few minutes as always, bud.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
There he is. Hall of Famer, historian, author Mike Babcock with Hail Varsity. Find him on Twitter at MDBabs. We'll check in at Wilderness Ridge next. Mike Schuchart's going to join us. Evan Bland will hit some recruiting and some spring football and Husker baseball next hour with Evan.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity. We welcome in Mike Schuchart from Wilderness Ridge Golf. Shuey, anyone crush a 300-yard drive against the wind today? Do we have Mike Schuchart? Shuey, do we have you?
I'll get working on this. We had him as of 2 seconds ago.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Oh, good. Shuey, how we doing? How we doing, man? Scared me. Do you have us? Hello? Bueller?
Hello?
Shuey, say hello.
You have a Shuey?
I can hear you.
Okay. Good. Shuey, what'd you think of the Masters? We'll start there.
It was a typical Masters. Koepka got out of the gate fast, strong, and then just so hard to play that golf course for 4 straight days like that, and then Rahm, after a 4-putt on the first hole to come back like he did, he played some amazing golf. So made it a very interesting race.
Yeah, Mike, tell me about that mental game that comes into play whenever you double bogey the first hole. That was a rough start for Rahm. I'll admit, whenever I first saw it, I said, well, Rahm's out of contention for the weekend, because the tone it sets for the weekend. How do you overcome that from one of the biggest golf tournaments in the world?
I can tell you what it's like to bogey the first hole.
You can't tell how to come back, though.
No, I know. I'll leave Shuey to that one.
Sometimes that works in the opposite. Sometimes that works to wake somebody up. It's kind of like slapping in the face and like, whoa. It can go both ways. Sometimes it's like shock mode. But as good as he's been playing, and prepared going into that tournament, I think it kind of woke him up, got him a little more focused, and obviously it worked because he played some amazing golf, and he played under the worst conditions. I mean, he had the worst draw, playing in the worst conditions the whole tournament, and to shoot what he did to stay in contention. And then when he got the last round where it was an even playing field, I mean, he had played the best golf of everybody there leading up to that point, and he just carried it over. So, I mean, he's on a roll right now. And that's what happens when those guys get into a groove, man. They are really good.
Mike Schuchart's with us, Wilderness Ridge Golf, Hail Varsity Radio, talking the Masters. And what did you think of Phil? You touched on Koepka, but Phil really surprised a lot of us here with how hot he got going. Yeah,
kind of. Not really, though. I mean, if you look at the Masters, the history of the Masters,
he does well.
You look at guys Fred Couples. I mean, he has no business making the cut, playing like he's doing. But there, like the old saying says, there are certain courses for horses, and Phil's had a pretty good track record there. Those guys that have played there, that know that golf course, I mean, they play some amazing golf when they get there. And just the tournament itself, I mean, it just brings out a different excitement to those guys. And the Masters is the Masters. So when they step foot on the grounds of the Masters and they have a great track record there, they do some amazing things. Bernhard Langer's another one, Fred Couples. I mean, these guys are old. They shouldn't compete. They can't compete on any other stage except at the Masters.
Shuey, what's your reaction to Phil overtaking Tiger for the most winnings from the Masters tournament ever? I believe he's over $9 million now after the performance this weekend.
That's crazy. So, but again, man, he's played good there for a long period of time. I mean, what he said, that 65 the last round, so he's the oldest player to ever shoot that score, and it was his best final round, I think, ever in all the years that he's played there. So, I mean, it's just, he likes the golf course. He has an amazing track record there. So that's a little surprising, but not so much. I mean, we forget how many times Phil's played there. and how well he's played there.
Shuey, what do you make of Rory's struggles? And then also let's touch on Tiger with that plantar fasciitis and possibly some hardware issues with that repaired leg. I mean, Tiger looked 150 years old, but start off with Rory.
Yeah, I think Rory, man, I'm afraid the Masters is that tournament for Rory. I mean, he's playing good. He feels like he's ready, and he gets there, and it just never happens. Sometimes you can want something too much, try too hard type of a thing, and then it gets in your head. I'm not surprised he WD'd this week. He just kind of needed to get away from it for a minute. He'll be fine. Mm-hmm. He always is. He's too good not to be. But that Masters is his bugaboo tournament. So hopefully when he finally plays one year, when he doesn't have a whole lot of expectations, is probably when he'll win. Mm-hmm. So if he ever does. And then Tiger, my gosh, I heard that story about a screw was sticking out of his leg. That's not good. It's not good for his doctors either. It's like, wow, they should have put some better glue in there or something.
lot of hardware to put in him though, too.
That's true. So, yeah, it was really sad watching him. When the weather got cold and him trying to walk. He did. He looked like he was 150 years old. I mean, it's amazing that dude made the cut, but then it was also really hard to watch.
Mike, the big story that's been coming out of the Masters this week, aside from Jon Rahm's victory, has been the pace of play discussion with Patrick Cantlay. What side of the fence do you err on there? And I guess, what do you see in that argument?
I mean, that's been an issue forever. You just got some guys that they're slow. Like they've tried to do all kinds of things to make it better, but I don't know what the right answer is. They have to do something, though. Guys can't play that slow.
Does the PGA follow baseball and go with a shot clock instead of a pitch clock?
They do have one. They have a time clock. So the first player to play in the group has 50 seconds to hit their shot. Every player after that has 45 seconds. So, I mean, they need to tighten it up a little bit, I think, of when they start the clock. So it's funny because I know guys that are like that and things that they've done in the past to kind of combat that. So David Duvall comes to mind. So David Duvall, a little slow. All of a sudden, he would be swatting a bug away or something, the imaginary bug that would fly in his eye. So once that happens, you're distracted, so the shot clock has to start over because that's an outside interference type of a thing. So it's like they just learn how to play the game to give them more time to get prepared. So, but that comes with them having to prepare differently. They just have to learn how to prepare so they can play faster.
Well, it sounds like a potential a business opportunity here with, like, I'm a professional golf distractor. I show up to the course, I yell at you, you get an extra time on your clock.
You will not make this putt, you jackass. Yeah, we need the guy that wants to go to Sizzler to show up.
Make it slower then if you do that.
I know. About 15 seconds, Shuey. What's happening at Wilderness, bud?
Just, man, the weather's getting nice, warm out. People are out. We had our first event on Monday. It was a great event. Had 144 players. So, man, we are into golf season now. So it's fun. I mean, it's going 100 miles an hour, and that's better than the winter. So I'm kind of excited about it.
Shuey, thanks for the time, bud. Good to talk.
You bet. Thanks for having me on. Stay safe.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. And Nick is imploring a chest hair shot, Elijah, from you to match the make that crew. My fault.
Well, Nick's making fun of me for the yawning, which...
Yeah, we need to get you some...
It's not a tiredness thing, and it's not like a disinterested thing. I'm just yawning. I don't know.
I used to yawn, but that's when I was student teaching and I had to read story time to kids.
Well, it could be... I don't have like.
Is it still like 500 degrees in that studio? Because it's 500
It's
degrees.
a little more. I wonder about the lighting because it is just bright fluorescent lights. I wonder if like the Kelvin of the lighting is actually what's causing
affecting you.
I don't know, but it's like I feel amped up. I feel juiced up. I got my coffee in today. I feel just fine, but like I'm just yawning a little bit. Maybe it's a medical condition. Maybe it's one of our listeners can look into that. Maybe excessive yawning is indicative of something wrong with me.
We will check into that. Good from Shuey, good from Babbers this first hour. Can find the podcast, Hail Varsity, on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play is where you go to find that. The video portion as well, Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Each segment there, or can do the whole show. It's available for you. And that'll be posted shortly after 6 tonight. Tomorrow, excited to talk some more college football with Gary Barnett. Danny Burke. Beeson will join us, get his take on the NBA playoffs and play-in. Danny will be there for us there. Brandon Vogel back with us. Hour 2, we'll spend a little bit of time with Evan Bland from the Omaha World-Herald. Husker football on our mind. Recruiting, a good day for Nebraska, getting Ashton Murphy. That's big. And, of course, Husker Basketball doing some good things today. We started that off to begin the show. Nebraska Baseball needing to pick it up. And that's an understatement. Reminder to get buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Buckle up. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. And a good tweet came in, and it's a fair question from Steve. And he's like, look, using to UNO makes it very difficult to get behind this Husker baseball team. You'd think at this point you wouldn't have any yawners.
Okay.
I'm just saying at this point you wouldn't have any yawners, and it's clearly a focus thing. Let's hear from Will real quick on the pitching, because I think that's a fair point you brought up with Shanneman. If he went too much last night. And now Nebraska, I'll say this, got screwed a little bit in the ninth. There was a ball that went off of a UNO's runner.
Yeah, potential interference.
It was an interference. It would have been an out. But Nebraska didn't have any challenges left. Mm-hmm. But here's last thought from Will Bolt.
I mean, again, they hurt us. I don't know if that was the third inning, the 2-run inning there, some 0-2 hits. You got ahead if your strikes. They scored a run after a leadoff walk there as well, but just didn't put them away when he had a chance to with 2 strikes, 2 good pitches. They had good approaches going. Give them credit. I mean, they did what they needed to do. We didn't play good defense. We obviously, we're just, like I said, we were steps slow defensively, and it wasn't good enough.
He won't tolerate that, and they know it. You've got some tremendous talent on this team, and it is going to have to be one of those lock-in situations like Mike laid out with do your work against Northwestern, but go into Iowa with an in-state win against Creighton. Evan Bland, a little more baseball, plenty of football. Next hour, Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Can find us on Twitter. Do so at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel, and the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter handle at HVarsity Radio. Streaming the show on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter handle and the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. We'll catch up with Evan Bland here in just a moment, efforting him, his thoughts on Husker spring football, and some thoughts on Nebraska's problem with midweek baseball, Big Red Baseball, another tough one last night at Haymarket. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 489-1240. The numbers to call. You can email the show, Chris at HaleVarsity.com. We'll get into some thoughts on Ashton Murphy right now. Nebraska getting their first in-state commit for 2024. Elkhorn South talent, 6'5", 240-pound lineman with Ashton. And a really good program from Elkhorn South. And Nebraska right now looking at a guy that has played both ways and performed very well. You had a lot of different schools actively recruiting him. And you had Coach Potroast, of course, with Nebraska. Terrence Knighton really liked what he saw with Murphy. Defensive side of the ball feels like where he'll end up in that needed and wanted three-man front in the 3-3-5. And his frame is something that, as he comes in at 240, can maybe max out to 270 or 280. Yeah, you put some weight on him, you project, you develop. He's a guy that could be pretty good for Nebraska. And the important part is he's an in-state get for Nebraska. There's some reality this week as to some players Nebraska has wanted that they've not closed on. Still plenty of time till signing day, but you had some early spring recruiting momentum back on the 25th of March. That's got to get rekindled a bit. You still have the spring game to get some official visitors or unofficial visitors here too. But as far as winning the battle here for Ashton Murphy, Air Force in Colorado in on him. Wyoming really liked him. Iowa State as well. Some names to look at. Mike Sauter caught up. Mike, of course, great work with Hurrdat, is all over the prep scene. And some excerpts from Mike's sit-down caught up with Ashton Murphy last night, Elijah, and pretty insightful here. And it came down to that first question, why Nebraska, and, Nebraska getting an in-state prospect?
Well, they were all very personal to me, and they were all very outgoing with the recruiting process, made it all pretty easy, and I really liked the people there. So
it's a connection thing. He felt like, yeah, I can play for these guys. That's good. The connections there, the personality and the being personable is huge, but also it's a fit for what he wants to do at the next level for college football, and also what Nebraska sees him being able to do. Who's on the horn?
Evan Bland from the Omaha World-Herald.
That is nice. Evan, how's my friend Evan doing? Good to see you, man.
Hey, he's doing well. Yeah, it's great day to be out and about.
It is. So we were talking about Nebraska's latest get, Ashton Murphy. Want to get your perspective here. Looks and sounds like the defensive side of the ball for Ashton, which is great. But overall, Nebraska, Evan, able to pick up an in-state commit here for 2024.
Yeah, I think it's the first of probably quite a few over the next couple of months. And, I mean, it's the kind of commit that you want to get. I mean, you look around at some of his other offers and suitors. I mean, Colorado, Iowa State, those are two teams that you like to beat on the trail. You think of, Elkhorn South and some of the talent that it's turned out lately, from Teddy Prohaska to Mav Noonan and now Murphy. It's the kind of guy, when you talk about recruiting in-state and the 500-mile radius, that is key. I mean, those are the kinds of bodies that you have in this area. You have linemen, tight ends, typically, and so if you can start building up from that, I mean, that's a good place to start. And he's a guy who some schools saw as an offensive lineman. Nebraska likes him on the defensive side, at least to start. Obviously, that could change as you go down the road there, but he's a guy who you could see as this development machine takes off at Nebraska under Matt Rhule. He could be a regular contributor in a couple of years as they put on weight and coach him up. So a solid building block piece to this 2024 class, and they'll be happy to have him.
Evan Bland with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Evan with the Omaha World-Herald. Find him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. Right now, where do you put Nebraska's recruiting momentum at? They just got a name. They just got an in-state kid. That's great. Of course, Gage Ginther going to Rocky Top early in the week. So how do you look at this 2024 class right now, Evan?
Yeah, they missed on a few. Andrew Sprague to Michigan was another one who was a target and has been a visitor for Nebraska. In some ways, it's kind of weird because it's like I think there's a temptation to sort of tether how Nebraska is doing collectively in recruiting to what Dylan Raiola is doing, and as much of a roller coaster as there's been there, and they felt like they were a leader, and now it sort of felt like more like Georgia maybe is that team again a little bit, or USC. I think there's a temptation to say that Nebraska is not, moving with the same momentum that it had a month ago. But, I think the momentum might not be overt the way that it was when you had the big recruiting weekend last month, and that'll probably pick up a little bit next weekend with the spring game. I think that's probably ultimately where we are, is you've had these couple of months now where you've planted the seed with recruits and they're going on visits all over the country, different prospects. But typically the spring game and then the month or two following that is when a lot of guys are ready to go ahead and pull the trigger and have their college destinations secure before their senior years of high school. So I think, you'll start to see Nebraska's work paying off on the trail here, again in the coming weeks. And while, again, it might feel a little bit like a lull right now, it's going to pick up with some of the visitors coming for the spring game next week, and the way that sort of organically builds as prospects talk with each other and they see the crowd and they see the excitement and that sort of thing. So it's been sort of an ebb and flow, I guess I would say, in terms of just the results and how it's felt. But I think it will probably be coming out of that here with the spring game in a couple weeks.
Evan, whenever you look at the line in particular, what differences have you noticed between the Scott Frost tenure and the Matt Rhule tenure in terms of what types of guys Nebraska is going out and getting? Because whenever I look at Ashton, he's not a huge guy, 240 pounds, 6'4". It's a big departure from Nebraska going and getting mammoths on the offensive line, those 6'9", 6'10" types under Scott Frost. So that's just what I've noticed thus far. Are you noticing the same thing, that Nebraska's seems to care a little bit less about size whenever they're recruiting linemen now?
I think that's fair. Offensive and defensive linemen. They were really big on tackle radius and long arms and big frames. And that's part of it. But I think the other part that's just as interesting is, okay, if you have those bodies, or if you maybe even transition to more of a little bit quicker, smaller frame, the emphasis on mobility and flexibility is higher, I think, under Matt Rhule's staff. I mean, they don't have their offensive linemen wear knee braces anymore because they want to encourage them to bend and move. You talk about some of the biggest movers this spring. I think two of them would be linemen. One of them would be Bryce Benhart, who's been at that right tackle spot. Matt Rhule's been, he's come out and said he feels like Bryce Benhart's an NFL player, and maybe that emphasis on mobility could pay dividends for him. And I think a guy like Nash Hutmacher is another one who has sort of been in spot duty. He's bulked up, but maybe hasn't had the maneuverability that he was known for, especially as a state champion wrestler in high school. So even just an off-season of conditioning with those guys, reshaping their bodies a little bit, how they're being asked to be used in their respective schemes, I think will be really interesting. So probably a little bit of an adjustment in terms of the body type, but just as much, I think, as they mold these guys to be more flexible through off-season conditioning.
Evan Bland with us, talking some spring football, Hail Varsity Radio. Evan, what do you think the biggest gift Nebraska has in Coach Garrett McGuire? What do you think his true wheelhouse is? I know there's been a lot of discussion. We haven't talked, quite honestly, a ton about his age. I'm kind of trusting the coach there. If he thinks he's good enough to coach despite his age, get on it. I like how he talks about his kids, and there seems to be respect. But from your vantage point, and when you cover the program, what do you kind of hone in on here with Coach McGuire?
Well, I think it's been helpful just to see little bits of the open practice that we've had the last few weeks, and I think that's probably changed my perspective on Garrett McGuire a little bit. You think the first time that I saw him in person was at one of the press conferences where they started introducing the coaches and running them through interviews. And I think in hindsight, he maybe was a little bit nervous that day, and that's totally understandable. That's probably something that was new to him. But then you see him in his element out there around the Hawks Center working with receivers, and there's feedback. I mean, there's constant feedback. Every single rep, every single player gets some sort of response or critique or encouragement from McGuire, and he's just, he's a ball of energy, and he's 24, and so he's able also to jump in and demonstrate what he's looking to teach. So I think that's, it's funny you talk about youth as sort of a disadvantage, but I also think it can be his greatest asset. I mean, he's got boundless energy. It seems like he's in every morning at like 4 or 5 and works out and gets at it. One of the benefits of being a younger guy, and I think we all can relate at different points in our lives, is like when you're unattached and you're young and you have passion for something, like you can just dive 100% into that thing all the time, just immerse yourself into it. And I think he's that guy. And the other thing that was interesting that Matt Rhule said earlier this week was, he used Tuesday as an example. Later in the practice, when they shifted into a 7-on-7 drill, it wasn't Marcus Satterfield, the OC, who was calling plays and running the offense. It was Garrett McGuire. And so I think his combination of growing up as a coach's son and being in that culture, but also just that deep knowledge of football that clearly is something that he's passionate about. Those things blended together make him really interesting, and I think he's got all the qualities to be, in the next 10 to 15 years, a head coach at somewhere pretty prominent.
Evan Bland is with us here from the Omaha World Herald. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, before we get you out of here, let's go to Husker Baseball. They drop a game in 10 innings last night to UNO 6-5, and Will Bolt, following the game, was disappointed in some of his position players, their intensity, their approach at the plate, how they played defensively. And I want to get your reaction. What went wrong last night for the Huskers?
Well, it's sort of an ongoing trend now. I mean, Omaha's taken 4 of the last 6 from Nebraska over the last couple of years. Creighton's gotten them, more often than not, too. And I think it speaks to sort of the larger challenge that Nebraska has with these in-state games where, and I hear it from Creighton and Omaha players and coaches every time I'm at one of the events, is they say, for those guys, playing Nebraska is a step up in intensity. I mean, the crowds go from a few hundred people to a few thousand. They know the guys on the other side. There's a chip on their shoulder to sort of stick it to the dominant in-state brand, whereas Nebraska, it's sort of the opposite, where they're coming off an emotional series at Michigan that they take, where they locked in and played well, and now you have a home midweek against Omaha before you go back to league play. And so, one side is sort of getting up for the moment, the other side is trying to sort of get through the moment, and I think that was reflected, and Will Bolt said this last night, just in terms of their aggressiveness at the plate, the sense of urgency with which they play, and they still almost were able to come back and win the thing, even though they were down 5 runs midway through, but it doesn't work out, and I think it's just another sign that this team, as high as its ceiling can be, there's also this realization that they're not talented enough to just roll teams if they're not locked in and ready to go.
Evan, Nebraska's record needs to be what for a regional? Not host, but go.
Well, they're at 18 wins now. I mean, I think you got to get in the 35 to 40 win range to be an at-large possibility, and really more than wins, it's about RPI, and to be an at-large candidate, you really need to be in that 30 to 40 range. Right now, Nebraska is right around the 90s, mid-90s. They dropped 15 spots after that Omaha loss last night. So I don't know that their at-large bid chances are gone entirely, but I think they're becoming longer with some of the midweek struggles that they've had. So to me, it becomes more about winning your weekends. Can you win the regular season in the Big Ten? I think that would get you in position to where you want to be. And if not, then it might come down to that auto bid from the Big Ten tournament. I think they're on pace to certainly be back in Omaha for that event this year. So it's not impossible. This next stretch of games, they should, in theory, pile up wins. Northwestern is not a good baseball team. Minnesota is not a good baseball team. So if they can start taking care of business, it could get interesting again. But right now, I think their at-large chances have taken a hit in the last couple of weeks.
And for what it's worth, to get to 35 wins, Nebraska needs to finish their season going 17-6.
Why not? 17-6, that works. Evan, thanks for jumping on with us today, bud.
Yep, thanks, guys.
All right, there he is, Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald. And some more thoughts on Nebraska's recruit from Nebraska's new football recruit. Also some football odds and ends on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Good to hear from Evan Bland. Get the segment, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for the Hail Varsity Radio podcast. Also on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Full show or just the segment, your choice, your call, all good. So Evan's like, okay, 35 to 40 is that window for an at-large in the NCAA baseball tournament. You can make it real easy and just win the whole bleeping thing in Omaha come Big Ten tournament time, or crown yourself in the regular season. Doesn't get you the auto bid, but it takes care of that 17-6 number with the Elijah Herbel math to get to that number. Nebraska right now at 18 wins, some very winnable series. But you've done yourself a disservice with your midweek performances. Creighton still looms. Another UNO matchup looms.
You have South Dakota State coming up.
Just a bad look, but more of a bad mentality by this baseball team to not be as locked in. And to go from one end of the spectrum to the other, Elijah, and Will Bolt touched on it. You heard it earlier. You play your a really good ball game and fight and find a way on Sunday to go 2-1 against Michigan. You come back against UNO, who you should want some revenge against from earlier in the season, and you're just not there. You're striking out 11 times. Your starting pitcher didn't make some of the pitches he would like to have made, and your approach, your focus, your respect wasn't where it needed to be. And when the clubhouse doors closed, I mean, Will's super, super intense, and he ain't bashful about saying it. You heard as much in his postgame.
Yeah, and whenever you look at that 17-6 number, especially with the midweek games coming up, Nebraska's room for error in the midweek games has gone down to virtually nothing. So let's do some quick math here. 17-6. Nebraska has a total of 5 midweek games left.
You got to win out.
You have to win all 5 of those. If not, for every loss you have in midweek games moving forward, you need to back it up with a sweep on the weekend. So it just eliminates your room for error on the weekend. If Nebraska wins every single series, which is they're all 3-game series coming down the stretch here. If Nebraska wins every single series, get 2 wins, 1 loss, and Nebraska sweeps their midweek games, you are at that number of 35 wins. You have reached that number exactly. That's probably going to put you, as Evan said, on that line. You're going to be at an at-large contention. You might not be guaranteed, but a couple games in the Big Ten tournament might do it for you. But for every loss after that, again, Nebraska now has to turn a weekend win into a sweep. And you have some opportunities. Northwestern, a great opportunity for a sweep coming up this weekend. You look a little further ahead in the schedule, and you have Penn State. Penn State's another good opportunity for a sweep. That is towards the tail end of the season. Then you finish the year with Purdue, who it's an all right opportunity for a sweep. But Nebraska has chances to get that 35-win mark. But as we've talked about for, I think, 2 weeks on this show now, their room for error just keeps on getting smaller and smaller. And for every midweek loss you get, it has to be a sweep, or else you're not hitting 35 wins, and you're probably not going to get looked at for an at-large bid unless you do really, really well in Omaha come the Big Ten tournament.
And you don't want to waste this team's talent. You've got some big time guys in Bryce and Max, and your starting weekend pitching has come together, and you just need to have a better season than you did last year. I'm not saying there's any issues going on other than, man, there was some hope and some hype with Husker Baseball based on what you did against Arkansas not that long ago. Mm-hmm. All right, maybe you're going to start getting downhill.
And even what you did to Vandy earlier this year.
What you start getting downhill, and maybe it was going to work out for you. Right now, though, you need to stop the inconsistency, and you need some guys to start performing much better than they are. We'll get to some of your emails and calls. Chris at HailVarsity.com. To the phone lines we go, 489-1240. Who's with us?
Chris is standing by.
Chris, go ahead. Thanks for calling.
Hey there. Great show, guys.
Thanks,
I do
man.
think they pretty much have to win the Big Ten tournament. I don't think there's much in the Big Ten that's going to impress anybody. Northwestern is really bad. Purdue's really bad. Penn State's awful. Even Michigan got kicked around in the non-con. They were in first when we played them, but they're not that. They're not
CWS
good.
Michigan. You're right on.
So I think they got to win the. I mean, yeah, they need to play well, and maybe if they get to that 17, 18 more wins, and then win another couple of games in the tournament, that might be enough. But I think they got to win it because I don't. With how they've stumbled in the midweek, and then they're a horrible start against a bad San Diego team, I just think they probably have put themselves in a corner. I hope not, but they just got to get on this tick. I mean,
well, the count is definitely.
Shortstop's got to start fielding the ball, man.
The count's definitely 1-2.
The dude's got the bat, but man, you got to learn to play the position. He's been horrible in the field, and as good as he is offensively, he's just really hurt the team with his defense. Did again last night. Anderson, he's pretty much flawless, and the lineup is generally pretty good. And they still scored 5 runs last night, which should be enough to win you 95% of the time in the midweek.
I would think. Chris, thanks for the phone call.
Thanks.
Appreciate it, man.
And to Chris's point really fast here, if Nebraska does reach that 35 win mark, what they'd have to do from here on out gives them a good shot at winning the Big Ten regular season crown. Let's make that clear. Like, we're talking about, well, Nebraska's got to do it. Well, if Nebraska's in position for an at-large bid, they're going to be in position for a Big Ten crown, at least regular season. Whenever you look at the fact that Indiana, who's played 3 more conference games than Nebraska, has the same number of losses. They're at 7-2. Nebraska's at 4-2, and you have 3 great chances this weekend against Northwestern, where you could then go and even up where Indiana's at right now, at least. So you're not far back in the Big Ten in terms of going and winning it, but Nebraska fans just seem pretty down based on those midweek performances. But if you can do what you're supposed to do on the weekend, win the Big Ten crown, and you get to that 35-ish win mark, I don't want to call you a shoo-in for a regional, but you should be able to make one. But I think where the disappointment comes from Husker fans is whenever you look at that Vandy win and you look at what Nebraska was building a couple of years ago. And I mean, Husker fans out there were saying, well, maybe this Husker team this year could host a regional if they can figure out a Sunday pitcher. They figured out their Sunday pitcher, yet they're still losing these midweek games, which are just so perplexing. So I'm not down on Husker baseball right now. I think they could be performing better than they are, but they're not in a bad spot in terms of postseason right now. But as we've mentioned, the margin for error just thins with every single midweek loss. There's
plenty of room right now on the Nebraska baseball bandwagon. Okay, and I know we're talking about it. So why are they talking about it? Listen, it'll fill up and it'll get awesome. And you remember the glory years of Nebraska baseball when they were it. And how packed Haymarket was. More of you will start paying attention to it if they get on a roll and get some wins and some juice. But right now, this on again, off again is tough to take as a fan if you're a Nebraska baseball fan with what you see one weekend and then what you see during the midweek. But Will was right on to call him out last night, and we can say call him out. He was on point. They're better than this, and that UNO, good for them. They're going to amp their game up. Creighton's going to amp their game up, and being a Nebraska baseball player, you know this because you've had these games before where they're going to give it just everything they got because they want to take you down. They aren't you. You're the one that got the Big Ten scholarship. You're the one that got the Big Ten nod, and you're the one that got the Nebraska baseball nod.
Well, you're playing at Nebraska, and realistically, with the resources and fan support Nebraska has, Nebraska should be the gold standard of baseball in the Big Ten. I know there's been Indiana has years here and there. Michigan had that College World Series team. There's occasionally good teams in the Big Ten, but in terms of consistency with fan support, with the amount of money you're paying your head coach, with all that, Nebraska should be the gold standard of baseball in the Big Ten. And maybe that's where it comes from.
UCLA haven't moved in yet.
I mean, maybe that's where it comes from, that Nebraska isn't playing like that in terms of attention to detail, but I'd say you have the most talented roster in the Big Ten. The hitting's incredible. You have the 2 arguably most consistent hitters in the Big Ten in Bryce Matthews and Max Anderson. When is Nebraska going to put it all together? That kind of feels like the question right now, because whenever they're on, I think they can beat anyone in the Big Ten. I think they could go do really well in a regional, but there's just too many times this season where they haven't been on.
They gotta be locked in. You can't flip the switch. and just kind of roll it out there. A couple more thoughts on recruiting with Nebraska football. As Ashton Murphy says, yes, the Elkhorn South product. He caught up with the Hurrdat Sports' Mike Sauter last night, and Sauter posted that. That's on the Hurrdat YouTube channel. Can check that out from Mike, also his Twitter handle. But just to wrap up the recruiting bow here, what made Nebraska feel like home? Again, part of Sauter's sit down here with Ashton Murphy.
It's definitely the coaching staff and Coach Rhule being all involved, because some places the head coach wasn't that involved. But Coach Rhule, he was really involved with everything, talked to me, talked to other players too. It was just really important that they're all talking to me and making a connection.
Again, that's the second point made here about connection by Ashton Murphy. Elkhorn South, Evan mentioned it, there is a nice pipeline of talent heading down I-80 for Nebraska.
Nebraska's place to go, yeah. Everyone loves it, seems like. All my friends are going there. And all the coaching's doing really well there at Elkhorn South. So it's been really amazing.
Last thought here from Ashton, defensive end, right? Let's get some weight on him if Nebraska's projecting what side of the ball, and one of those down front three defensive linemen, and defensive end looks like a natural spot.
And they see you more as an offensive lineman, defensive lineman?
D-line. They have me at the end.
There you go. Check out the full interview. Mike Sauter, Hurrdat Sports, and a good get for Nebraska and Ashton Murphy. That's big. So,
well, really fast, can we mention the fact, and I think this is funny, we're going to get there in just a second, the funny part, but you look at him, 6'4", 240 pounds. I looked up all his measurables. We're very similar, me and Ashton, in terms of everything, except he is much faster than me and he's a much better football player than me. So with all those things considered, could Nebraska have offered one Elijah Herbel back in the day if I played defensive end and I ran a second faster in my 40?
Did you get a second? I think you stick with the mustache right now. Yeah. Is your one flex.
He runs a 4.8 something 40. I think I was in the 5.7 range. So
that's all right.
In the same frame.
You were asked to make sure angry dudes did not come off the edge and hurt your quarterback.
Angry dudes like Ashton Murphy. You watch his film.
Yeah.
Dude's legit. I think he's got some work to put in terms of that frame, only 240 pounds. If you want to go play defensive end in the Big Ten, you'd think 280, 290s maybe where you want to be, but we'll see. The in-state connection is big there, and the Elkhorn South connection big as well.
The bar, is a Bosa. When we talk size and speed, right? 300, 4.5, it's all good.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Ben Woodhead with us. And Dr. Ben, you're good off the tee box. You putt for dough. And what a Masters weekend. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, the Masters weekend was fantastic. The weather was great except for those 2 days it rained and poured.
Yeah, and as everyone's dodging trees, we're holding our breath for Tiger Woods, and just different reports coming out about Mr. Tiger, and want to get your take on Tiger and his health. Of course, he had to withdraw from Augusta, and let's focus first here on plantar fasciitis. With that ailing him, we know that he's suffered leg injuries from that accident, Dr. Ben, but also just the plantar fasciitis he's having to deal with, coupled with just how hilly Augusta is and the cold and cool conditions.
Yeah, so plantar fasciitis, that is a very tough condition to get over. The good and bad news with it is that there's not a surgical fix generally for it, and so if it continues to linger, it can be very debilitating for some time. And especially with somebody like him who walks and who maybe is not, he's not one of the regular tour guys who's walking the 72 holes every weekend, certainly could have been a situation where it flared it up as he got in the hilly hilly course of Augusta. And so certainly problematic, especially when you get into those third and fourth rounds if you're having that severe plantar fasciitis.
Tell me a little bit for folks. I mean, we've all heard of it. What is it, and what are some remedies for it? And can it get tweaked easily? Is it something that's going to be an ongoing battle for Tiger or for even weekend warriors?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely something that can happen in athletes as well as weekend warriors. The plantar fascia is on the bottom of the foot, and so a lot of times the reason this can happen is because you get calf tightness. And so, it's hard to say, is this from his prior injury, his prior surgeries? I would suspect there's some type of relationship to it. But what happens is that calf gets tight. It basically, as you stretch your foot out and lift your toes up towards the sky, it stretches that plantar fascia. And so it just can cause a significant amount of pain. So, if he was not necessarily conditioned to do this, or maybe wasn't quite ready, he certainly could have aggravated that plantar fascia. And then, obviously it was severe enough that he was barely able to walk and had to withdraw. The treatments for it is a very frustrating type of treatment oftentimes for patients because there's not a quick fix. It's usually time, it's stretching to stretch the calf region out or that gastrocnemius, the actual muscle of the calf muscle. You can certainly do some steroids. That's generally not the most common form of treatment because you can rupture the plantar fascia as well. Generally, surgical treatment is kind of end stage type of treatment and is not commonly used.
Dr. Ben Woodhead is with us, a Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking Tiger Woods and his withdrawal from Augusta this weekend. And a Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, Ben Woodhead. So, Dr. Ben, not only do we have plantar fasciitis to talk about with Tiger Woods, Jason Day sharing more details about Tiger Woods' physical state. And at the end of last year, you had Woods dealing with some health issues. He pulled out of the PGA because a screw went through his skin on Saturday, and that's part of it too. We know about his leg surgeries to get him back and functional. It's been a miracle he's been able to be what he's been since that last accident. But man, the screw coming through the skin, that makes me shake a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't really know what type of hardware that Tiger has in himself. And so from the sounds of the article, it sounds like, one of the screws is backing out, or, if I read everything right, it sounds like it was coming out of the skin from prior hardware. And so that's certainly a problem because something that had been done before is either failing or, you can have infection. Once the hardware in the body starts moving, that can be a problem and certainly cause a significant amount of pain. But then if it truly did come out of the skin, like Jason Day had said, then you start worrying about another set of problems such as infection. Does something need to be done from a surgical standpoint? Really, you're kind of in some hot water once you get to that point.
And that is really, really tough when you have to implement screws. I mean, you guys hate it, and the patients have to deal with it. And we're talking about high-level athletes like Tiger, or I think of Kevin Durant, who's had to have screws put in. It's just it's a situation that's difficult. And a lot of times when we talk about the region of the foot, blood flow becomes an issue on top of just the hardware, correct?
Yeah, there's tremendous amount of issues once you start going down that pathway where hardware starts failing. Really, the possibilities can be endless. And so if that truly is happening, it needs to be taken care of before he does anything else. There, like I said, there can be a multitude of reasons that failed or came out or whatever reason it happened for. They need to figure that out. And obviously, he's not going to probably get back into golf until that's taken care of.
Dr. Ben Woodhead is with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking Tiger Woods. And is there a short fix with hardware issues, or is it as simple as just having to go back in, reattach the screw? You have to have surgery again? What's the fallout here potentially?
Well, best case scenario, if the hardware's actually poking out or coming out, is everything else had healed and you just remove the hardware and then you move on with life. That would be best case scenario. The other question is, though, you got to figure out the reason why. So if the reason why the hardware failed was because maybe the fixation or, his prior, whatever was broke that they had to fix did not heal, then you got to address that. That's a much bigger issue when you start talking revision surgeries or second surgeries to try and fix what failed. And so much of his issues just resolve around the why. If it's just a screw breaking and popping out, that's an easy fix. But if it's a deeper reason than that for infection or the hardware or the bone not healing, it would require a much bigger operation and a much bigger deal.
Well, you had open fractures affecting his lower and upper portions of the tibia and fibula. That's from the February 2021 car accident. You had doctors treating him to help stabilize the right foot, his ankle bones. You had surgeons insert a series of screws and pins. There's a lot of hardware there. And we were just talking about a screw that possibly burst through the skin. Dr. Ben, a thought from you. Do you think Tiger's able to overcome this and still play selectively, or do you think his future's in doubt and it just now he'll have to just turn to some recreational golf and spending time with his kids on the golf course? Do you think his career's in jeopardy?
Well, I think time will tell. I think what we find out in terms of how aggressive they have to be with fixing the solution or fixing the problem will give us more information. He didn't look bad the first couple rounds. Where it really started to get a lot worse is once he started limping. And so once you could tell that he was actually in quite a bit of pain, that's when he started struggling. But the first 2 rounds, he didn't do too bad if you actually watched the tournament. And so, if this is an easy solution, I think there's a chance. I don't know what's in Tiger's head, but I would suspect he'll always try and play the majors if he's able. And it really says a lot about him that if he really tried to push through despite having that much pain, he's been an absolute warrior his whole career, and I would suspect that he'll still try.
Dr. Ben, take care. Thanks for the time today.
Hey, thanks a lot, Chris.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this Wednesday, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. And some interesting comments from Tommy Frazier. As Tommy was part of the podcast, and I want to get this right with the podcast specifically. But pretty good praise for Matt Rhule. It's the Heisman podcast. And talked about the culture topic of what Rhule's building and how it parallels a bit with Coach Osborne. So that's good to hear if you're a Nebraska fan. And it's the podcast here, the Heisman Huddle podcast. Sam Cassio hosts that. Johnny Rogers, Eric Crouch do the podcast. So T. Frazier was on there, and that's from a guy who had a super high standard of winning, had a super high standard of how things were supposed to be done on the field, and as far as the process to get to that point of preparation and development, that's a big thing, Elijah, we're interested in for the spring game Saturday and then beyond. Can Nebraska get their stars to play like stars through development, and then you recruit good kids and you pair development with talent, and then you're cooking? And then what about the depth part of things? Can you get the backups to be a certain high level and come in? And that's just going to happen through work, yes, at the skill positions, but also on the lines of scrimmage. And I think from an edge standpoint, I think Matt Rhule is going to bring that back. And I don't know that it was gone, but it's not ever been to the level of what it was, where you are kind of an angry, ticked off dude and you're going to take it out on somebody for about 4 hours on Saturday. That type of mentality. And that's one of the first things Rhule's started with, is mentality, and then the how-to part of it to be a better football player.
And look at the teams in the Big Ten that play like that play like they have a chip on their shoulder and an edge. Michigan, I think, is one that you'd put in there. I think you would put
Ohio State used to be better at it.
Yeah, I think you would put.
They're still great. Don't get me wrong, but they're a little more fluff compared to what they were under Urban.
I was going to put the Wisconsin of 3 to 4 years ago in there. That team that plays with an edge. That team that offensive line comes out there and looks like they wants to hurt everyone on defense.
I think Illinois.
Oh, Illinois last year. Yes, that defense especially played with a chip on their shoulder. So you look at the teams that have done that. Well, guess what? Well, whenever they have a team that plays like that, they tend to win some football games. And that's not just the Big Ten. That's around college football, too. You watch Georgia. Georgia looks like a team that wants to take everyone that they plays head off completely.
They do. They're a team that's always had elite NFL talent, even under Mark Richt. But Georgia had underachieved. They go 8-4, 9-3. But they've got a just boatload of draft picks. Do you have that not nice, let's flip the switch and be a psycho on Saturday?
And I'd argue one of Nebraska's better players over the past couple of years, JoJo Doman's one of the only guys that's had that switch for Nebraska in the past couple of years. I think you could maybe go Cam Taylor-Britt as well. There were times whenever he kind of played with that edge, but Nebraska hasn't had that edge over the past couple of years. And there's obviously the fine line between having an edge.
You can be angry, but it's tough to like be an angry dude in 3-9. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 4. Thanks for tuning in.